So you don't have to look over the curb check.
You're not,
Very tight.
you're not the one that ever made welcome to Ellis sign right there.
No. That would be my next. Everything possible this time today. Christmas bonus. I think it's bigger. I know, I'm not there. Okay, that must be.
Actually, it's in go.
So,
I think it's more crazy.
She's done well, the groundwork on. So you remember we had to adjust how we did that because of the recommendation of the auditor. So we have a plan, I think, in place, at least we have a plan that we think we can utilize for the employees to receive a gift card for whatever defined amount the council establishes. And then the city will process the taxes accordingly. This will be a taxable income, so the employee will be taxed as far as their state and federal withholding. But we'll pay our portion of the taxes on top of that as the idea, so that they can get a gift card for X amount of dollars.
Okay, if it's $100, then what did they actually get?
They would get $100. Now, that cost to the city was going to be, if it's $100 gift card, it's roughly about $115 to the cost of the city. And for a $150 gift card, it's about $175 per gift card.
It'll be 25 in taxes.
Yeah, but that doesn't count what that employee would have to pay as far as their withholding. We can't, everybody is different, so it'll be kind of processed through payroll as an additional thing, that it'll be side with that gift card for that. The total for estimated for, if we did $100 was $12,554, and if we did 150, it's $18,645.
How much for 100?
$12,554. Yeah, the other one is 18,645. But based on, I mean, council's consensus here, that we would make that on next Tuesday so that we can get the process in time for Christmas here. Because I think that covers most of everything.
It's most of it.
We have to employ that to do that.
I thought we were just selling furniture and you're like.
Oh, God.
You're great.
Okay, so if you like that one.
So you know, the council and everybody used to have to do their December salary.
Yeah, typically built into the budget for this. I think that I, one kid, when I said people do tap into it, I don't think it has.
Oh, they dropped it right out.
But the gym equipment, a lot of times you see.
Well, so Randy's laptop is hooked into it, and Devin's is hooked into it because of the owl. That's our new owl thing.
You have a 12-hour base.
I'm all in with that.
Or if you talk, it listens to you.
What recruits?
It's also a microphone.
I would like to see us stay on that.
That's what we did last year.
Yeah.
wasn't it?
I like
I
that.
think you did go and appreciate that.
Then I will check the budget for sure.
Yeah, I think, I was just looking at year to date. We've only spent 52% of that budget, so there should be more than that.
Or my wellness stuff will come out there.
Is it going to be more than $100,000?
No,
We should be good. See, that's the appropriate would have been relatively close because now he knows what he can happen.
Why you do it?
Fred, what do you think?
150 like we did last year.
You're okay with that? You're okay, Jerry? Yeah.
We'll prepare that information for based on our numbers.
And then they'll be aware that there'll be a few taxes coming out.
We'll know. And that'll, because it'll be processed on as the payroll, it'll just. So if there's somebody who has a regular rate that they know that the paycheck is always this amount, it may be a little bit less.
It'll be less based on it. They'll actually get their card, but the taxes will come out of their paycheck. So for somebody who's always had 80 hours and they know exactly what their paycheck is, they obviously, if they are a kid which would keep in it, they'll see that portion coming out.
Be
They
about
have to pay.
15 coming out.
So it depends, kind of depends on how many withholdings they have. Where they are. So there will be some.
Yeah, we do the same thing, take a portion of certain bonuses, they just include it as income, figure the tax, and then take out the 150 as income. Cards.
Okay. Margaret,
So that, there will presentation for you. And this is kind of a first brush of it. I didn't get too into the weeds tonight, especially since we have a couple that are gone. If you look at that the first actual slide. That basically just shows where we are today through September with the budget. Now that says 2020 adjusted budget. What that is I took out the prior year reserve from revenue. I took out the appropriated reserve from the expenditures, so that it's kind of normalized to what we think we're going to spend and what we think we're going to make. So right now we're a little bit higher than what we have budgeted. I think I've done some projections. I think we may be closer to $40,000 in the red for this year. But again, that's a projection just based on trying to look at some historical spending, historical revenue over the last several months of the year and kind of see where I think we might end up. And I usually try to be very conservative about that. So
based on figure pay. You know, with the,
How much you use?
yeah, on
Oh, it's based on what,
actual,
this is based on actual what we got,
okay,
what we've been, how we're being billed, what expenditures we have going out, and what we have.
well, how are we, you know, we have to pay for so much whether we use it or not, I think we pay with what.
That's adjusted monthly, the way I understand it, and so that's kind of incorporated in here. We've been below,
Our two hundred pay,
I'm pretty consistent this year.
okay.
Right now, that. Yeah, I think it gets adjusted with, as the PUA kind of sets their budget for the year.
We did that January or
I think
February.
February. So the next graph is basically, I tried to look at since 2010, where we've been with our revenue and expenditures. That orange line is our target, what I would call our target reserve, which that kind of talked about that at budget time, looking at 90 days of cash and $250,000 for. And that's just kind of a target that I think is good for financial management wise. You can kind of see that our beginning cash each of those years it's basically stayed the same because our net income, our revenues minus expenditures, has basically been very little. It kind of hovers around zero. And if you look, I ran an average over that time period. Average is about $3,600 of net revenue over that 11-year period here. That means we gained about $40,000 in the last 10 years towards what would be for our reserve. And so it's basically the bottom line is it's hard to build up your reserve with that, and it's hard to plan for bigger capital improvements, and you also don't have a lot of room for error because your cash balance is lower. It's ranged between 250,000 and 90,000.
COH beginning actual.
Cash on hand, beginning of the year, actual.
Never had it, that's why I didn't do this initially.
And those numbers were taken from the audits, so except for the 2020, that was I actually never been on it. That would have been 19. So then the next graph is just trying to kind of show where we spend our money. This is based on the 2021 budget, and I just got it broke out by categories. I did kind of make some subcategories. You can see the water purchase as budgeted is that's about 3/4 of our whole entire budget. You added personnel into the water purchase, and you've got about 85% of that budget. So the idea is those are kind of some of our more fixed costs. We know we've got to have that much before we even sell the product water. So it doesn't leave very much pie left to cover your maintenance improvements that you're trying to do or need to do on your system. So then kind of shifting into look at consumption. So it has the prior year consumption since 2016. That 2020 value is currently as of the end of September. The 2020-P is what I'm projecting. That was based on taking the current 2020 level and adding in what the average of October November and December over the last, since 2016, and adding that back into the 2020 value. So you can see that we're kind of projected to be a little low on that. That's about a 14.3% decrease for the average of the previous years. I will be honest with you, I'm not really sure if that's right and all that. Well, and there is that, and if we go to the next slide, that kind of shows the consumption by type projected. And you see residential, commercial really drive what our consumption is. And I think schools were closed, but I guess my thought was in commercial lines, we had the pandemic, we had kind of a shutdown for 6 weeks. But I guess in my mind, I keep thinking, well, some of that should have picked up on the residential side a little bit, and we didn't really see that. We've kind of seen a decrease overall. The year, I feel like, has been relatively dry. So I don't know if, and it could just be that, people, if they didn't eat out, there were dishwashers running, and if they were eating at home, they had a TV dinner and they were just throwing away, which would account for the increase in trash the waste management was saying. So I don't know. I'm not sure how that, there may be some connections there. But,
The country club had no usage for this year.
they had some minimal usage the last 2 years. It was a little bit heavier. Before that, they were in that high. What's the revenue increase? I don't know.
Yeah, they don't pay for the raw water, do they, for the, like, for the golf course?
This is what's on that, those industrial account page.
This is just the clubhouse usage, not the golf course.
Well, I was assuming that it was connected to that they were pumping it, but even though they don't pay a very high rate, but I'm assuming that's where that volume came from.
The golf course.
Yeah.
That's weird. I thought, did we have some agreement with that, when you went across there for a while? If there was utilities over to Rockwood. You go across the golf course.
I think water runs down.
But
Did it run down to 196? Because
Or right away.
I think there's an agreement. I think there's part of that. It's like conversation. Some connection, which is partly why you got such a cheap rate for the water. That's something that you really need to look at.
oh, definitely great. And now you said run all the way to the water there.
Yeah, right.
That's why I run straight through the water.
I was thinking we had a right of way. Like that, I remember when I was working.
I'll look into that. Country club, figure out if that's what's coming from Lake Paola that they're being charged for. Because it's volumes. Its volumes they were like in the hundreds of thousands of gallons until really this year, 2020, and there's about 2.5 million gallons so far.
My water bill for that, for this one.
One side of our windows,
Did it really?
it's going to,
Like that?
because my son moved, didn't have water in his place, still doesn't, will probably get it tomorrow. So, him and his 5 kids have been showering in our house. And I redone my whole lawn, and so I've been watering my grass probably 3 hours a day. Yeah, the city sent me a notice that it was 3 times the normal use.
There's time on that shower.
I'm hoping I didn't hear that.
So kind of what's next, take me to, I'll look into that. I kind of want to look at where October consumption was. Sounds like the smells might help us pick that up.
So what do you think we're looking at in regard to our water rate?
So, I want to look, I'm going to preface some of it. So I want to look at, I think some of the numbers that we have budgeted for sales is a little bit high. And I realized I kind of based on what we had last year when I built this budget. My concern is, because you don't, if you're calculating a certain percentage of increase on this level, but that level is really lower, then you got to figure out maybe a little bit different. And then I think the other thing that would drive that is council's interest in, this year we transferred a little money to the general fund with the idea that we were kind of moving some of that, you know, a little bit of Stephanie, a little bit of me, and a little bit of Vicky all out of water, and trying to, that kind of compensating the general fund for that. At what level we want to do that transfer, what level, how much we want to invest in our CIP moving forward. Some of that would be driven by the master plan project we have slated for next year. Right now, I've got a kind of a budget projected out. If we did a 7.5% increase next year and a 7.5% increase the next year, that would give us, it would kind of project out that we would start being able to cover our costs year to year, assuming we don't have any major.
$1 million, and how much it is. Like, how does it impact water?
It would be an increase of 7.5% across the board to that.
you're saying like on $100 bill,
Well,
it would raise $7.50.
yes, that should be.
That would be significant.
Yeah.
I just wonder if the bills are high.
And now that projection preference with that takes the general fund transfer from 50 and gradually builds it up to 100,000 by 2025. And it starts investing in 2022, $100,000 into our CIP budget, and then $200,000 each year after that. And that also then allows us to build our reserve up to the level, up to that $750,000 range. Now, that's all in perfect scenario.
That's right.
That's what I'm there. But I kind of want to give you the scope of where, I mean, to get to where if we're going to have I would venture to say that the $100,000 to $200,000 in CIP investment is going to be a far cry from what our true needs and how we need. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to meet that true need. But I would imagine when it all gets said and done, that the need in the water utility is going to be in the multiple millions of dollars to address aging infrastructure. And that's just my guess based on what I've seen in other communities. But I think we probably are.
Very good, lots of mandates.
Well, and that's that. The concern is that if you don't invest at least some, those repairs that you have to do are going to be more expensive and may be a bigger headache because they're going to be emergency repairs versus plain stuff.
But you can't have your water supply.
So in a perfect world, based on what we've been talking about, what did you say the reserve should be? We're talking about a 90-day reserve plus an additional amount for the CIP, correct? And that's just the reserve. That's just the reserve.
What is it right now?
We are, I think we started this year. We started this year with 176,000.
It's only a little bit. Yeah, you have a little.
Oh, yeah, and I guess that's what I want. I kind of wanted to kind of cover this, that, you know, this is, and it may be that our idea is that we know that we want to continually try to build our reserve up to that level, but we don't need to get there in 5 years. We just know that we want to be able to have a little bit each year that we can try to get a little bit.
And we have to be cognizant too, because we're talking about raising wastewater, we're talking about raising trash, and we'll be cognizant of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is our biggest need infrastructure wise the mains? I know that's what breaks the most.
Yeah, I would, and that would, I guess I would have to have a longer conversation with Kirk, and honestly, I think that's something there again, it comes out of the master. I think it's just improvement to the mains. Well, we do, but we're not, it's not putting a whole lot in there. And what we really need to be doing is talking about blocks and blocks of repairs, not 2 blocks here every year. Right. And that's where, you know, again, if you put $1 million back in this CIP, you could use that money in a sense, bond a larger project and say, we know that we're going to have this much, we're going to bond a big water project that we're going to do. Or we know that, okay, we're going to keep chipping away at this every year, but we know in year 5 or year 7, we're going to have enough money in that CIP that now we're going to pay for a project to do a larger project. So,
On that 7.5% increase that you talked about this year and next year, just hypothetical, that puts money into the CIP.
that puts in
Builds and stuff too. What's the ultimate goal for that in 5 years?
well, ultimately, the way I see the CIP is it could be a zero balance each year. You don't have to carry a reserve in there because you're just using that as your bank to save for projects. That's where I said that I think even the levels that I have, you're going to end up finding that when we get the master plan project back, that need is going to be, you're going to need $500,000 a year. And that's going to be something we're going to be, I would say this too. We're not going to get there. But we're going to prioritize these projects and know that we're going to try to keep the next 10 years. years, and that's how we set up our rate. That's another thing about how we move forward. It may be something that we want to try to set, to do a rate adjustment now, and then know that next year when we get the master plan back and done, and that may be towards the end of next year, depending on how that gets going and how it all works, that we know that we're going to have to address that again, because that's going to dictate. Because that you may decide that, well, really the plan or what we would like to do is only $150,000 a year. That's a workable plan for us. We think we can get all that done, and so then you can adjust.
Well, it would be nice having that in there so that we can think on some of the yearly projects, but also know we have enough that if we have to do a yearly project, if we decide to, we've got enough.
Yeah, you've got a rate structure to support what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's gonna be like I said, it'll be kind of sort of. Yeah, really, we got that's gonna be some.
Yes, it would. Be aware. Or shuttle things, I don't know, wouldn't know where we're at. Twenty-five people or 25%. It's usually the same one. Yeah, I know. I know. And some people forget. Something more towards.
So my plan is I probably kind of, if you got input of what you'd like to see, but kind of come back with this information and kind of have a little deeper conversation with everybody here and see what we do. I didn't tax Randy with this tonight, but I have a spreadsheet model that I can kind of put in there and say, oh, here's what a 5% increase looks like, and here's if we back off the CIP investment, this is what it, so that we could kind of look at that vibe and maybe say, oh yeah, that looks like something.
I think that probably helps you a lot of the other increase. You get to see where we would like to be and whichever rate increase would get us over the next several years, just so we can see where we are.
Water has been supported in time.
My recommendation is yes. You know, the utility that it is self-supporting. If you have people into it,
It's an enterprise.
and I realize that, yeah, and I think, and then the other challenge is as you adjust your rate, you're going to have people that adjust their usage. And then that's going to change your revenue, and then you have to adjust your rate. I always think about you end up trying to find the true cost of water, because at some point people are going to use this much water no matter what, and you're going to be able to charge this and kind of be somewhat sustainable. But there may be a little bit of shifting as you get there.
People become more aware of big residential times.
Right. Well, it also, for us, a lot of that our costs are fixed. Whether we sell one drop of water or not, we've got a certain we're obligated. So looking at, ideally, your service charge would cover all those fixed costs. So that way, then, as you have variable, that would be taken up by the consumption charges, but you can't really get there. Your service charge would be astronomical. but that's.
And what's, do we, do you know the amount that we have to, do we have to purchase so much a year or so much a month? From the year?
It's a kind of a prorated amount per month, and so like in the summer, it's a little bit more than.
If we have a dry year, we do real good. If we have a wet year, we pay more.
That's what, that paper pays, kind of. That's the best kind of based on.
Yeah.
What year the next.
Yeah, I think what they do is, I haven't looked at all that, but I think they'll look at, okay, where they ended up at the end of this year and say, okay, well, we've got to be here. This is what we assume everybody's going to take.
It's a rolling average, I think. I can't remember. What's our loss ratio right now?
It's better than it has been.
I think that,
I think it was low teens. You know that?
no, it is better though than it has been. I do know that. Now I see whatever it should be. I mean,
You said you wanted to see something. I was in the middle of writing down results world or something.
Just the projection of what the different rate increases would be, you know, yeah, a spreadsheet, just, I think that gives us a better idea of where we are versus what percentage rate increase we're talking about, and I think that's gonna help us compare to what we've already got going.
Do you have any other questions, or if you look at that, you have any questions on, you know, one of the graphs or anything, let me know, or my logic on something. On that.
Other questions? Thousand people on it.
The roof bids, we have two bidders. Kind of working through those. Cool looking was the low bid. Talked to the other two contractors who kind of gave us quotes, and they were busy, and one of them, there was a comment in the bid spec. I did not rental of a bucket truck, because my thought was, if you rent a bucket truck, you figure that into your rate on all that. But if you didn't need to rent a bucket truck, you keep a hoverboard or something. So, yeah. But they were like, well, that wasn't in there. My thought was, is they could ask those questions, but they didn't, and I think they were just busy. So, but we felt like they had to come do this. And we did include that information in the packet. That was on insurance, the claim information. And so we provided that to them, so they would assume that that was something that would be excited. So we'll have that bid award.
How did they compare with the two?
I think they were right in line with that, because one quote that we had before, the lower one, and I think it was
Did one of them two say something about the added percentage for increase in materials such as linen?
well, that's probably why we went ahead and redid or did a formal bid, because they were going to have an adder. So I'm not sure what that was going to be, but that might have probably been right where we're at.
Okay.
health insurance. Well, and I guess it's, do we call it? Basically, the renewal for all of our insurance, through Gallagher, we see a 6% decrease in health insurance over an average. The dental remained the same, and there was like a 4% increase on the vision premium, but that's a very low premium, so that amounts to less than $1.
36 cents. Yeah, they're not 36 cents.
This is first different decrease.
No, we had one last year. We had this first, second year in a row.
I thought we wrote in that.
No, we're small enough. That's irritating. I know. That is my intent, that our wellness program, because I'm trying to.
So what's the participation rate in the wellness program now?
It was a little bit, it was up just a little bit this year when we did it. I gave more flu shots this year than what we did in the past. 57 screens.
Is that where they come to?
That's when they come and get their blood drawn.
Oh, yeah, I missed that.
Every year, or every time we get them, every year you have somebody else to call someplace else. So it was really well done.
Good. They do a job.
They do, we had the same people this year, but literally they were in and out faster than what they had ever been. Minus one person, this is like, you know, where they got a car breakdown. On our own. But, yeah, we started at 7 and they were out until 11.
And they do a good job. I mean, the reports you get back.
They are, and I've had a verbal report, on our collecting. Each employee gets an individual, their screening and get collecting group as to target way larger election learn what we have. And so we had 2 areas that were up a little bit, but, one of them was, weight. So, in all honesty, our weight challenges have, we haven't been able to do that because we haven't hired somebody from outside to come in and weigh us. Gallagher's no longer able to do it, so I don't know if it really helps, but you know, sometimes when you know that you're gonna have to get on the scales in front of somebody,
It helps.
it does help a little bit. You know, when you know that somebody's coming and they're gonna watch you, we're gonna go, oh, well, I see this. So, yeah, I've been able to do that since COVID, and I don't anticipate it for the next year either. And the other one was glucose, which obviously is kind of tied to the weight. Those were our two slightly areas. So, that money is, I believe, was spent.
I agree, I think. So too.
That's impressive. It's 6%.
But then the other is going through significant,
And that's not to say that we can't, you know, we're small groups, so it just takes a couple catastrophic claims to flow out of water. The prosecutors, you know, they're targeted, they expect us to 89% of our premium, and we are actually.
now that's really. Good job.
I wish I could take that credit, but.
We'll give it to you.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome. I'll take it then.
Okay. And great. Is he someone that was wanting to build that? What was it?
Baseball, softball, so
If that changes.
Indoor, yeah.
Indoor.
Indoor, if you say indoor, that
Yeah.
was the number one issue. It's not a baseball field, it is an indoor badminton.
Is that what this is?
Yeah.
But I would like to
A lot of requirements, not very narrow one.
When I read this, I looked at it, I thought, what, baseball song? They do it out there.
I guess I didn't put it. But it's like, yeah, there's no provision.
Everything will be used
Why did it change?
Well, I guess I'll go and jump in, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start with the rebuilding for that lot in order to have the indoor baseball, softball, batting cage facility. The planning commission held a public hearing last month. And there was a lot more attendance than I thought there would be. When I say that, there was 3 couples, and we had a couple of writings. The 3 main issues were, as always, increased traffic. They're worried that the traffic would increase, mainly because they thought thoroughfare access was a new road. So I explained to them, no, it's not a new road, which I kind of get where they're at. They don't know zoning. So I explained to them that it's actually the overlay of the zoning. It's not a new road. The road is the same. It should not increase the traffic. So that solved that issue. The second one was the increase in noise and lights from the softball baseball facility. I told them it will be all indoors. It'll be very similar to the building that's already there adjoining the lot. And the noise, everything will be inside, so it should be minimal noise. And they're not gonna have like midnight hitting sex. They're targeting kids. So it should be hours operational after school till, after dinner time. So they would come down with that. But lastly, there was a couple that just did not want any development behind them. So I had to be the newsbreaker and say, it is an industrial park, and I'm sorry, but we want development. And actually, this is probably the best case scenario for them because thoroughfare access zoning and business park zoning are actually almost identical, except for some of the more intense zoning or uses require CUPs in the thoroughfare access zoning. So they actually have more regulations now of what would be behind them than what they did before. After they were like, no, okay, but they still don't want anyone to disrupt their peace.
There must be somebody there in that.
They do. And then. And they wanted to be sure the community garden would not get ripped out. This will be a temporary solution for the community garden as of right now. So this splits the lot after that we redone it. So basically we're all. After that, the mood calmed down, everyone was satisfied, it was lovely. So the planning commission. It was, the only one lady after that was just like, well, I don't want it. Her husband's like, I don't care. So it was, I can only imagine that house.
They didn't figure that out.
Exactly. So I'll figure out, I love what you do. So the commissioners voted all in favor to recommend approval. And then next we have, I've been sitting and working through the agreement. We've been trying to address some issues that we have had in the past of no development happening for a certain time and addressing some concerns of what if they just delayed the celebrating project. So I went back and through the files of Mr. Lee Tetweiler and all his agreements he had written for us. And so, this is pretty good actually. For them, we're gonna give them 24 months, so 2 years from the date of closing to build, or have a commercial building, or they agree to contract and they can give the land back to us. And then they have also 24 months, as I said, to either build or if they sell, they will have to split the profits equally with us. So we have it. So if they sell within 2 years, they either have to build, or if they sell within 2 years, they have to split the profits. So I think that's probably hard as I can find language in there. 2-year hold on, at least. Getting to do something. Thought that was, in my opinion, pretty fair, but.
Were they looking again?
We actually wanted to bring this to you for, I think this is Thursday.
Okay.
What you guys thought before we present.
Don't have a problem with that.
plan on getting it built back away from what I've heard.
This is more of a, if it does get built and is successful, and they try to sell it, right away, kind of protect ourselves. There you go. We'll get at least something.
Artisans and all that.
They'll do it, but it's just, there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
There's a need for it.
He said it's all I had, if there's no questions about that.
Okay, sanitation rate ordinance.
The sanitation rate, I've got the ordinance prepared, and as we discussed, move that residential rate from $17 a month to $18.25 dollars a month. But that leaves that kind of qualified resident group at $5 a month. And so without, additional demands or changes, that should put us to 2023 before we have to look at making that adjustment to trash stuff. And our current contract, just as you know, runs through August of 25, so. Yeah, 88 cents of that goes to that kind of adder for recycling, and then trying to ensure that we can absorb the annual increase. I think it's a 2% increase. They have in the contract.
Trash is getting to be people got trash everywhere that they shouldn't. Dumpsters, some companies used to have dumpsters there right in the house. And everybody had rather bring trash there. I see it done all the time, and they took that out. And the man stopped me yesterday, told me something ran, went out to the landfill where they had the recycling bins. So it's trash. I said, you can't do that. He says, oh yeah, this is from the federal laundry. JR, why did you get it? You said, I was like, and you know, I said, the old man's about 80, he's a really nice bro. They understand, so they're going to call him to do. I'm the blue. But trash is, people don't know, they don't want to pay out the county, they really, they don't want to really trash places.
You used to dump it into the ball field. So there's a few bins down there.
Yeah, they do.
Any questions on that? The animal ordinance, we talked about that a couple of, September, I think, early, I guess it was October. That ordinance has been working through that, basically looking to repeal just that section on the dog breeds that were prohibited and leaving everything else the same, other than looking at the impound fees. I think I looked at the penalties seem to be kind of in line. They're up to $500 and 30 days in jail, which is basically based on the judge's discretion and everything. But the impound fee, we currently charge $10 for a pickup and $6 a day. We're getting charged $12.50 for dropping an animal off at $7 a day. So
We're going behind there.
right. So my thought was, is as part of this adjustment of the ordinance, is just to go to $15 for pickup and $10 a day. That gets us so that if Osawatomie has an increase here too, we should still be good. We don't have to worry about getting behind that. I would probably go ahead and adjust that on the cat section too. That gets us in the cat section, so that those two adjustments.
Yeah, we definitely want to make sure. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I said, nobody comes.
So we definitely want to make sure our rates are covered, and then I think the biggest thing for me with getting rid of the breeds and man and making sure that the fines were appropriate was make sure the officers didn't have any issue, in other words, there wasn't any gray area. Like, because I think right now, that's the problem.
I
Have
think,
never easily enforce it, so.
and I talked to Chief, I think, my understanding of him was he did this modification, changed. That. Yes. Yeah.
Has Lee been asked to review that?
Not yet.
Okay.
I will, when I get it finalized, I wanted to kind of visit about the fees, and then I will finish it up, and then I will send it to him.
Okay, because I think that was the initial concern was some of the language that existed when the other review that or yes, review the entire thing. He had some concerns when I talked to him about. A year and a half, 2 years ago. So,
Now, under the penalty phase, what are the penalties if, say that if they have a dog and they don't have a register?
Well, I guess that would be,
Does it have a time frame, like if the officer says, you don't have this registered, you have 3 days to get it registered, or you're getting a fine, or?
that is not, I think they probably do that, it's not spelled out in the code. They call.
because I thought Don said in October that they would typically give us 60 days. So if somebody moved to town, they were new to the city within 60 days, and they can give.
I think there's language, I can pull it up, I think there's language that talks about that if they're got so many days once you move to town to do that. I think the officers may say, hey, it's registered, we'll give you 10 days with whatever. As far as penalties for not, I don't know, I guess that would be then if the officer wrote, the only way we have that in here now is if the officer writes a ticket or issues a citation for that, it goes to court. And it gets assessed to the judge.
What I'm getting at is more of somebody moving to town, I'm not as concerned about. It's having only 129 dogs, whatever you said it was, registered in a town that's probably got over 1,000 dogs. I think those other 800 some people, they either need to register their dogs or get them out of town.
Well, it would almost be, in my opinion, it would almost be better if we said, okay, your dog gets out and bites somebody and you get a ticket. The ticket is this much. If your dog's not registered in the city of Paola, it's no.
Yeah, I think that's something you don't say.
And I mean, that would be my thought.
Or if it gets caught tearing up people's trash and it's not registered,
Right.
fine, doubles or triples.
Right,
I
whatever.
don't
you
like
like.
to do something
Yeah,
on the highway.
Well, we could, I mean, I think we could write into that, have a little more, some standard language so that it's not necessarily up to the judge's discretion, it's more what it is.
My biggest concern is if they're not paying, the registration is minimal. If they're not paying that, they're probably not getting rabies shots, and they're not getting parvo shots, or any of the other stuff. They're just having a dog that could be spreading disease and all kinds of stuff, especially with parvo being such a bad disease.
Like our pet state is, unless you keep taking your pets in there every day.
well, and you're right, but that's just it, you know, to have 129 dogs. And,
Yeah, that's it.
That's, I've got more cats than that in my neighborhood, and I know which house they come from.
We have trash. We have trash, 3 possums. They made their home in our attic. One dog with us. On top of the 3 possums, we brought 2 cats. I don't know,
I wouldn't think that's, but we could support you guys for 149 dollars.
yeah, but that's why I'm saying there's a lot.
No cats.
But yeah, I would like to See, because in my opinion, that really encourages people to register for animals because they know it's gonna be steeper up if something happens and my animal's registered, but if it's not, it's gonna be double whatever it is, kind of like you said with the work zone.
I think that's probably what's dangerous to the dog. Somebody else, was it, I saw it today. They got a dog, and I swear to you, I miniature horse.
Oh, there's some real big dogs now.
I might put that in my house and completely destroy it. I mean, it would be like a big for a dog.
There was a dog that lived up a block up from me, and they've moved, but it weighed 185 pounds.
That's more that way.
It was one of those mastiffs.
That. How was she gonna move?
She's 165.
They're big
That
dogs.
one away. That was
I
really.
wish that's what I weighed.
I think that's 8 pounds.
I mean, there's some big dogs. Did you ever see it? That's what our industry like that. It won't leave the house.
For your rooster.
Yeah, but no.
Yeah.
I need register.
Well, I'll, may take a little bit to incorporate that. See if we can get that done by next week. Have them review that. Because that kind of changes, because we don't currently have that language in ours. And I'll just say this, if we're gonna do that, that's something. One of the things that I've seen in others, we don't really have a language in our code for when there is that kind of dangerous animal. There's some of the codes have like, okay, here's what you're gonna do. If you're gonna have this, you gotta X, Y, and Z, you gotta have. Then there is a point that they can actually be kicked out of the town, but you've gotta have a fence, you gotta post it, it's a dangerous dog, you gotta have so much insurance and all X, Y, there's a lot of stipulations for that. I don't know if that's something, that adds another layer on all this, but
It's a little bit extreme.
yeah, it gets, I mean, it's probably a more modern approach to animal code, but I think we can incorporate this other without doing that. We gotta dive in a little bit deeper and how we want to go.
I don't know, they just vote on people who can't have their pet, but they.
What's the cost for registering?
And
Yeah.
well,
Registering.
5 for that.
no,
No, it's bigger here.
It's 5 and it's 10.
let's see, what was that? The shot. Somebody try to work with a local vet and do here, you can come get your shots. You can get trying to drive registration so that we kind of, that's another thing. Get all this stuff, we kind of need to internally figure out how we handle this, because make sure that when they come, that they pay the right person, they pay the right amount, we know that they've been cleared so that we can let the dog go and all that kind of stuff, but that's some internal policies. So basically looking at maybe setting some determined amounts that if the animal is not registered, the fines, maybe we have set fines that if we get a call and we pick them up, they automatically get set fine for that. And if they're not registered, it's double or additional.
Something very extreme, like,
I mean, yeah, you're gonna get a $9 fine if your dog gets caught. You may go pay the $10 and get it registered, get a ready shop, because that's both gonna be under $100.
So they're getting some of that. They know they need.
Should be required. A lot of people should be able to have kids, but.
We'll work on those adjustments on that. The only other thing I wanted to add, that maybe the council is, I think I sent out Friday correspondence about Kansas Fiber Network, as part of the spark money, we got grant to put fiber in different places into Paola, and some of those facilities are going to be our students. And they need a spot for a cabinet. Like an easement. For a cabinet. Justice and property on the south.
Is that quite common, whatever that is?
No, it's a different.
What did they do? Quite common.
Quick call. They are internet service provider primarily in Paola that are mostly just wireless, like point to point. But they do have work with also automated put some fiber.
They're digging all over, they're putting in things and they're putting orange fences around the house, what they're doing. They're doing it all over the west side of town.
In Osawatomie, yeah, Osawatomie work with them to help bring fiber to their residents. That was facilitated by Osawatomie, their electric utility, so that they can utilize the poles and all that. It's a lot easier to work with municipality and use the electrical system. And energy.
And I see them all over out there, it started on.
One of the other things I had, wanted to talk about, Randy and I met with individuals with LU sports who are working on what they kind of come up with, working in sports and come up with ideas. All fields. The initial design was something that kind of keep they were making some major modifications, but they were keeping Wallace Drive open. And this is the time when your manager just made a suggestion that may not be something you like, so I'll take that. My thought was as well, historically there's been issues with safety and concerns about safety. Why not just close that down and put all the baseball fields in the cloverleaf setup? And then you don't have to worry about safety of kids crossing the street going from ball diamond to ball
Are you
diamond.
just talking about between big and little Russell where?
Well, there basically be two fields on either side of Wallace Park Drive.
Okay, but now, how far down are you talking about going? Would Julie Silver's is past that?
Basically, then what would happen is if this is, and this is a proposed layout, the parking, there'd be parking south of the American Legion in a straight line, so that kind of vision. But yeah, you got it.
You know, in the summertime, they used to close off, they just put.
Well, and that was kind of part of the conversation that they kind of did that anyway. So it's like, well, let's do this. It makes it look a little more. It look kind of like that.
Makes sense.
Is that? Okay, let me get on in. Where's the Legion at here, Randy? right there. So that's Little Russell, a Big Russell, and Ely Silver, and that's an extra field.
Basically, it's in the same area as they are now.
Yeah.
They would just take them into a quad section.
But they don't really have 4 fields, the one's a little one there on the trail, a little there.
But see, they would divide them up equally. All the same size.
They take that whole area there. So that means they would, well, we gotta get to the swimming pool.
Right.
I use walls for.
You could come off of Osage and get to the pool.
That would be your only way.
Well, and this is something, like I said, I threw this idea at them and they come back with this. I wondered if, get up here. I wondered if, this is kind of already a little bit of a trail. I don't know if we could just create a little bit of a bypass. So that if you did come in this way, you could come here and get around to the pool that way. If you're coming from, south of the town.
In other words, if you go right by the bridge where you go to those backfield fields, what he's saying, if you went ahead and extended the road on out, you just bypass that. If you go right past the ball fields, if you go right next to the woods and going all the way and coming out close to the pool or the rock stadium. So it'd be another way to get to everything.
It would allow you to do this and then still be able to kind of get into the other side of the park.
The way they've got this planted, they can convert it with the turf or the way they're doing it. Then the soccer fields can all use them, football fields can use them. It can cover almost every sport all in this one major complex.
What would they do with Paul's Park field? Big rock stadium.
I don't know if it'd be included in it or not. They don't use it much anyway.
Yeah, it was,
So there's 2 people down there every day doing something on it.
I think it would at least regrade.
yeah, regrade it and maybe paint grass on it so there'd be a bigger grass field, but maybe not have all fields on it.
Or what are they doing there now, soccer?
They may have,
The soccer's actually on up.
They're doing something at the rock stadium.
If they have an adult flag football, we can.
And then the kids use that field, those fields for, flag football and some of those kind of sports.
I like rock stadium.
I do too. Oh, they weren't kind of,
That would be a project.
they weren't kind of getting rid of Rock Stadium. They were actually planning on cleaning it up and enhancing it a little.
Well, I think something like this makes sense to me just because when Riley was playing baseball years ago, it was all, for me, it was always embarrassing to have a tournament here because you go anywhere else. We went to Wellington, south of Wichita, and you go out there, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a fantastic complex. You come here and go to the bathroom, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And this was good.
Right, right. Even just the general facility and the shape of the fields and everything.
and this would put a centralized concession stand out right in the middle of all those fields.
But I would definitely think you would definitely want to redo the gravel road around that to give a secondary access to the pool and to be able to get around. Well, there's already the road there, the gravel road that goes around behind.
Yeah, I know.
You know, the little fields are.
Right,
You're basically almost connected now.
Yeah.
right.
You just have to go.
Yeah, you don't have too much farther to go north to connect the field, to connect the gravel road.
No, they do away with Julie Silver.
They do away with Julie Silver?
Yeah, it'd be incorporated in these parks.
What would you do in good there? You could have been too.
Yeah,
That's the little girl, that's the police softball field.
Right, that's the little one at the backside,
Yeah.
on the south side of the gravel road.
Uh-huh.
they're keeping some of the little ones. But
Well, if you put that road in, you aren't gonna keep that.
That road, if you can see.
Yeah, that field's already on, the small field is already on the south side of that gravel road.
yeah,
That's how you access it now.
There's the trailhead, you come right here.
Right.
You just connect this. And move it.
Well, I'm just thinking it would be good to have that secondary road in case we did have a tournament, there's a lot of traffic, especially for emergency vehicles and whatnot, you know, to be able to get in there and access the pool and access the backside of the ball fields, but.
The main reason they haven't closed them in the past was just because of the county fair, you know, or people bringing in livestock and stuff.
Close to the trail. That road would be too close to the trail.
Well, I think if you do it a little bit. Oh, sorry.
The other,
So there's the trail. Right?
yeah, there's the trail.
And there's some parking spots, I think.
There's a trailhead right there.
This is, that would be right here. Because basically this field would go away and kind of shrink, I think. Is that right, Randy?
Yeah, it looks like, so the parking would be here, parking here. They would get rid of this and kind of shift everything over, so fewer vehicles, or fewer vehicles, or fewer vehicles, or fewer.
And there's some things they have to rig up this drainage here. That would be something we might want to do if that is to get another little bridge over here so people, if they park here, they can walk over.
That would be a good idea. That would look nice.
And the main reason for some bad stuff in the past in the facility was because they were mostly owned by the Legion, and the Legion had no money.
The only thing I will say is we need to make sure that there's plenty of parking, because that's the main issue when you go out to the new fields out by Cottonwood right now, you go out there, it's a nightmare. It was a nightmare trying to park, it really was, because they didn't have enough parking.
Well, then when they quit letting you park in the grass, and they even more.
Then you drive by and you got that holding on right up front. It's like,
Yeah, I'm not sure how many, with this proposal, how much parking. I know that one, I can't remember, but they felt like they could do that. I'm assuming they made the investment for here.
No, I
Where do you go, we know that lot here by, on the inside of the Russell there, is blank. Do you remember the people that come down there? South Road there, and they asked us if we could make that street instead of the gate, and so it would kind of curve around and go to the region. But in the city, it was that lot right there.
They do now,
Uh-huh.
they didn't used to.
Did that
Now.
be utilized in the parking?
Yeah.
And that way, maybe it would be getting just that many people on South Road, or we can figure out that maybe they're getting down there.
They've really done their homework on this. They've taken into consideration where it has flooded in the past, how much it's flooded. And this will make them so they can keep the fields dry. I say they've done a lot of research and we've worked it out good.
But we basically got the layout today. They're giving us some different renderings and some cost estimates for what I would call the locally set up. The thought was is that might help. There was some adjustments, but everything might offset because they could save a little bit on light posts, is my understanding, that they could have a set of light posts that could go to the field so that there's no. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully more to come on that. Any other questions on that? Baptiste Drive and the Hedge Lane project, and the right turn lane. So the bids came back higher than expected. A bit higher than expected. And our engineer, Diane Roseborough with PG Consultants, has been working with KDOT to just kind of know those bids and then kind of work them, that, haven't heard anything definite. If that's the case, we'll probably have to bring adjusted, like a new agreement for that to council, so we can approve that adjusted. The idea is that they would move their cap up. Right now it's at $334,000, so then we have a lot of expense on our hands to that project go with it. That cap up, that stuff.
Why did they come in so much higher than what they anticipated?
I don't know.
There are other things that go along with that.
Well, and part of that could be, I don't know this for sure, because I haven't seen the tabs of that. That's something Diane was working on. Is there's some federal money tied to it. And sometimes with federal money and state money, there's additional costs that have to get those projects done. So, because that project will basically be, my understanding, the way that works is it's so much, you write them the check and you got, the project, they will receive the project. That piece of extension, that'll be kind of ours to bring development. The only other thing that I wanted to make a note of, so I don't get in trouble for this, is that somebody in this room is going to graduate from the municipal clerk certification. The municipal clerk certification.
No, you do a lot of good things.
Yeah, next week's my last one.
Yeah,
Graduation.
There is a YouTube or a Zoom link if you're interested. So.
That's very expensive. How long did you have to go?
It was a 4-year.
4 years. Wow. Wow. Well, that's exciting. You should be very confident. Yeah, that's great.
Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Good, have a good month for sales tax.
Yeah, sales tax is good again. Yeah. We actually, if you look at that one graph, we are, if you go back to 2014, we're basically at the year-end level of 2014. We're basically the last 3 or 4 years, we're about a month ahead